It's time for the Brouhaha Sports Show. Brouhaha Sports with award-winning sports writer Dale McKee and co-host Marshall Wood. Talking sports with the legends of the game and famous sports personalities. Brouhaha! Now to Marshall and Dale with tonight's guest.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's edition of the Brouhaha. Marshall Wood and Dale McKee here with you to talk a little sports. Dale, how's my partner in crime doing today?
Well, I've been a little under the weather the last couple of days, but I'm ready to roar today. Ready to roar.
Well, I know you've been battling some health issues, but we know that you're up and able to talk, so that's a good sign. You can talk.
Yeah, it's kind of like riding a roller coaster sometime when you're sick, you know. You feel good for a few minutes, and then you don't, you know. So,
yeah.
Anyway.
That's a good way of putting it. See, you people that have been writing sports for 40 years know how to say catchy little things like that. Being sick's like riding a roller coaster. I like that, Dale. Which brings us to some of your other work that your sideline view. I've got a copy of it here. Let's talk about some of the things as we get started. We got a guest. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But man, some big things in college football this weekend. I mean, talk about Mississippi State. How about them dogs?
Yeah. There was some. I was kind of shut in there Saturday, so I got to catch up with a lot of football Saturday. I watched a little bit of the Southern Mississippi game for just a little bit, and then by that time it was over, we got to watch. I was flipping the channel between Mississippi State and Auburn, and Alabama and LSU.
Yeah.
And those games were dramatic in any indication, and I started watching more of the Alabama game because I thought Mississippi State was in control. And then I flipped back up there, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? Yeah, what has happened here? You know, where's your offense? You know, And so, but Will Rogers made plays when he had to with his feet in his arm, and in the end, they got it done. But you really have to hand it to Auburn too. I thought the circumstances that they were under going into that ball game. They were those guys. They bought in to what Cadillac Williams was selling, and I think that hopefully those guys will be able to win a couple more games before the season's over.
Yeah. On a similar note, I'm gonna change venues here for a minute. I got a good friend of mine, James Williams. A lot of folks call him Rat. He's a big LSU fan. And I love him to death, and I don't care much for LSU. But anyway, we were talking at the season started, and after a game or two, he was kind of feeling kind of bad. He said he usually has a party where they cook alligator, sauce pecan, and all red beans and rice and jambalaya, and it's really something to be a part of. I'm thankful to be able to go. But he always does it with the Alabama LSU game. He told me after a couple of weeks into the season, he said, I don't believe I'm going to have that this year. And then after a couple more weeks of the season, he got to thinking, he said, I believe the party's on. And I'm going to tell you what, the party was on at the Williams house the other night because LSU won that football game, boy. I tell you what, they're going to fool around. They've got the inside track on the West, buddy.
Yeah, and they've got I think Arkansas and A&M is their last two SEC games, and unless Arkansas was overlooking I guess looking ahead to LSU this week, it looks like right now LSU will be heavy favorites in both of those games. And like you said, they got the inside track, and more power to them.
Oh yeah, that's going to be interesting. Let's talk about this in the final segment. We got a good guest tonight, Dale. Tell us about our guest that's going to be coming our way.
Well, I don't know much about him, but he's really a Wayne County guy. And he works for the school system in Wayne County, but he's also on the executive committee in Jackson for the Mississippi High School. So he's going to give us some inside information.
Okay.
That's what I've been told.
Okay. Well, I tell you what, let's get right to that. But first, we're going to take a commercial break, and then after this break, we're going to be back with tonight's guest, Robert Hathorn, Bubba. coach from Wayne County High School and the Mississippi High School Activities Association. We'll see you after this break.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome, everyone, and tonight, as promised, we have our special guest with us. A lot of you, or just about everybody, knows him as supervising principal for the Wayne County High School, Mr. Coach Bubba Hathorn. But you serve in other capacities around the state of Mississippi, which brings us to having you with us tonight. First of all, thank you, Coach, for being with us tonight.
Marshall, I am glad to be here, and hopefully we can, hopefully our conversation will enlighten some people or make them happy anyway.
Yeah, well, happy. That's what we're all about. So let's talk about, first of all, let's talk about you and your role at the Mississippi High School Activities Association. Now, I'm under the impression that you may have been or now be on something called the Executive Committee.
That is correct.
And you're on that?
I am on that. This is my 9th year to serve, which is kind of unheard of. This year that I'm serving here, the 22-23 school year, there was another member that was from District 5, which we represent, moved to another district, and I was asked and selected to fill out this unexpired term. So normally the terms are for 4 years, and you can serve a maximum of 2 terms. So that's where we are. With me being back on the executive committee with the MHSAA.
Now, what is the purpose of that? That sounds so important, so executive committee. So, and I don't doubt that it is because you're on it. But now, what's the purpose of the executive committee?
The biggest thing that we do, the MHSA, and we represent all of our schools. There's 8 districts, and Wayne County is sitting in District 5, and there's 4 in South Mississippi districts, and there's 4 in North Mississippi. But our main role is to make sure that legislation is passed involving all extracurricular events. Not all extracurricular events controlled by the MHSA has to do with athletics. We have the arts, we have music, the band, the choir, all that is also under MHSA. But we basically help set the rules. But I'm going to say this. The rules and the changing of rules is brought to the local district committees every year, either in July or January. And those are voted on twice by a committee of about 70 people, which is called the Legislative Committee for MHSA. If they want to get something changed, and that happens every year, there's always amendments to be added. And it's basically the schools help us to make the rules and to say this is what we want. As long as it's passed at the local, we take it to the state level and it's either voted for or voted against.
So when you use the word legislative, that's the legislative body of the Mississippi High School Activities Association, not the state of Mississippi.
That is correct. That is the legislative body of the Mississippi High School Activities Association. Each school or each district would have 4 legislative members, and they all convene together, and anything that is brought up in committee, they vote on it. If they pass it, then it comes to the executive committee, which I sit on, and then it's voted. It's either voted up or voted down.
So our district has 4.
Yes,
representatives.
District 5.
Who are they?
Okay, we have Scott Gibson from Clarkdale. We have the coach from Collins. We have the coach from Mount Olive, and I'm not sure where the other one, what school the other gentleman is at, but that is. I guess Coach Haney. I'll take that back. Coach Danielle Haney from Wayne County.
Okay, one of our own.
One of our own. She's on that committee. So each division or each district has that many representatives on there.
Okay. Now you may have already answered this question, but how do they get? Are they recommended to be on that body?
Yes, it is. You're recommended, and then you're voted on by the District 5 people, and normally those elections will either occur in July or January.
Okay. Now, the executive committee, is this the committee that oversaw the main topic we're going to get to in a few minutes, the reclassifications or the changes in classifications, the additional classifications? Does that all come through the executive committee and no one else?
For the most part, there has been recommendations out there in the local committees that we expand to 7 classes. And obviously when Alabama went to 7 classes, what's going on in Alabama, Louisiana next door, Tennessee north of us, that's where some of that comes from. But it was brought up, it was voted on, and it passed unanimously. Now I was not serving on the committee when this was voted on the 7 classes. I've moved in basically now for the reclassification and who goes into 1 through 7A.
Okay. Now, why would we go? Well, I remember when I got involved with War Eagle football back at the turn of the century. There were 5 classes, and then we went to 6, and now we're at 7. What are some of the reasons? I'm sure there's more than one reason why you would add additional classifications. Talk to us about that process and why. Was that determined, and what was the basis of that decision?
So, back in the day, we had the top 32 teams in 6A and 5A, and then everything else was divided up equally. And let me say this: we're talking about 240 schools with MHSA, and there's 10 non-football playing schools, and then there's 2 schools that only has girls and 1 only has boys, and then we got some of the parochial schools. But when this came up, when you had the top 32 in 5A and 6A, there was a big disparity between the top of 6A and the bottom of 6A. There was probably over 1,000 numbers in different. So a lot of this came up with your bigger schools. This is not something that the 1, 2, 3, and 4A's really looked at. This is something that to balance out the numbers, a numbers game that some of these schools, if you go to Harrison Central, or if you go to Tupelo, or if you go to one of the DeSoto County schools, you may see some of the 6A schools that has over 2,000 students. And then you go down the road here to some of the local schools, they may be sitting there with 900. So there's 1,000 difference, and I think that was the biggest thing, was to get a little bit more parity amongst the bigger schools, to move the larger schools more closer together.
Yeah. Now, are there economic impacts? I mean, I'm sitting here as an outsider looking in, and I come up with my own ideas as to why, or when I'm probably wrong most of the time. But if I look at this thing and I look at the addition of another class, we see another set of playoffs, and that's about 15 games per classification. Now, I'm not sure, but I think once you enter the playoffs, the Mississippi High School Activities Association gets some of that playoff ticket money, do they not?
That is correct. It's usually around 30% per game in the playoffs.
Okay.
And then the schools that play, then they split the remaining part of that.
And don't misinterpret what I'm saying here when I ask these questions about the money, because I mean it takes money.
Sure.
You have got to have money to operate. I
Exactly.
mean, I understand that, but I was looking at this, and if 15 games, people don't realize that. 15 games. If you say 3,000 tickets a game, which I think is conservative, especially when you talk about how big a crowds are at the state championships. I don't know what the tickets are. At $8 a ticket, that's 45,000 tickets. That's $360,000. That's a lot of money.
And I think you're going to see the price of the championship tickets are closer to $12.
So it's even more than 300.
It is.
Okay.
But I'm going to say
it takes
this,
it.
It does. And there are a lot of corporate sponsors or partners that's working with MHSA that say, hey, we want to sponsor the football championship games. And I know several years ago they've gone to giving these teams pregame meals and postgame meals, wherever the games are hosted at. And a lot of these sponsors are really helping them with it. And it takes some of the burden off of the schools having to provide pre and post game meals. And it's just like this. If you get there, and I'll go back to 2015 when Wayne County played Oxford in Oxford for the state championship, and it was pretty much a 50-50 split crowd. We got $6 off the tickets. MHSA got 6, we got 6, and that was a big reason to sell the tickets here. Wayne County made a lot of money. We spent a lot of money because of the charter buses, and they're just having to move all your operations 4 hours north. But we also made good money that particular year, and I know a lot of people say they're getting richer, but I know the men and women that work at MHSA, they work extremely hard. They hardly ever have a Saturday off, simply because a lot of the state championships are played where the other sports are played on Fridays and Saturdays. And keep in mind, there is several activities that are non-revenue producing that championships are held, and these other sports really have to fill in the gap financially.
Let's come back and look at the size of the district. So we got more districts and we got smaller district sizes. So typically, what we come with 6 with 8 teams per region.
Correct.
So, and there's 4 regions, which is the 32 you mentioned. Okay, we take those 8 teams and we play our district schedules, and 4 of them go to the playoffs. Now we're going to go to 6 teams. Is it going to be the same deal, or the top 4, a higher percentage of your people are going to get to go to the playoffs, which I think that's a good thing.
My deal is, I don't know, and I'm one vote, but I don't know if Mississippi has a population to represent 7 classes. I'm not sure we had it for 6 classes. I think some of it has been watered down.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But, we live in the era of that everybody gets a trophy, and I get that, and I understand that. We want to recognize everybody. But basically, we're putting 12 5A, 6A, and 7A teams in South Mississippi and 12 in the North. So there's only going to be 24 in the top 3 classes. And you got 2 6-team divisions. You play that, and then those 8 will square off in the playoffs, and to go from there. The division that our particular school, Wayne County, is going to be placed in, it's going to be very competitive in all of our sports. Our soccer and our volleyball, our baseball and softball, those divisions will be extremely tough. And you're going to get on the bus and you're going to drive to Gaucher or one of those places on a Tuesday night or whatever. But it is what it is, and that's the purpose of the numbers. That's the way they fell out, the mileage, and I think it's going to be a good division for us overall.
Yeah. Well, I want to go back. I did read somewhere, and it spelled out specifically that with the new classifications, each district all the sports would be played in the same district. Now, I may be outside the lines here and not know what I'm talking about, but under the current configuration, you may have a football team that's in one district and a softball or a volleyball team that's in another district. Talk to us about that and how this is changing.
When I say MHSA went through this list, and we had that meeting up there last Thursday, and part of the selling point was all sports, especially in your 5A, 6A, 7As, we're going to play the same people in all sports. There is a couple classes, and there's a couple schools in 2 and 3A that they're going to be playing a couple sports in one region, and then they will be playing another sport in another region. And the bottom line is, you run into some people that do not play football, and all of a sudden, if you have 2 schools in a region that's not playing football, in order for everyone not to make the playoffs, you've got to kind of move them around to make it fair for everyone. And but for the most part, everyone is in the same division. They're playing the same folks in all sports. And that's one way to help set all your calendar, all your schedules to make it work. That was a selling point to me, that they're going to be able to put everybody in the same division.
Okay, now let's just back away from this. Before we do this, technically speaking here, and we're looking around here, what are some things that, you got papers scattered all over this conference table in here. What are some of the things that you want to tell us that that I might not have asked, or things you want people to know about this classification, the process, or where we're at, or where we're going?
The biggest thing that everybody needs to understand, that this reclassification went through 2 voting periods in the local districts. They went through it in last summer, and then again in January. Or January of 22 and then July of 22 to completely approve this. So all these classifications, a lot, if they say, they might just say this and that, the schools push this through for the seven classes. We may get 2 years down the road or 4 years down the road, and they say, hey, it's not any good, and they may go back and revisit it. But just my experience up there for 9 years, once there's some stuff in there, they're not going to take that back away.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, they're not going to, especially if you're getting in that extra night of state championships, instead of having 3 on Friday and 3 on Saturday, there's probably going to be a Thursday night mixed in.
Great question. I didn't even think about that.
For the football championships coming up, and I guess that will be in 23.
Have y'all looked at that yet?
They're in the process right now of trying to get out 2 to 3 years ahead for all of their sites, and that is a deal. And it's so hard right now to work with the SEC to find out, is your building going to be available or your renting going to be available the first weekend in December, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, because you don't never know.
Yeah.
The season's supposedly getting over Thanksgiving weekend, but then again, if somebody makes the SEC championship or whatever that they are, it's a very possibility that their sites are not available. But they're trying, and I know the meeting of the day, they're reaching out years in advance right now to secure a site for football, basketball, baseball, and basketball still wants to go to the big house in Jackson. And a couple years ago we had it going to the universities. The football is kind of hung up at USM right now. That's a good thing for us.
Yeah,
it's very close. It's the crowd is closer to the field, and it's a good arena for football. They got the turf, so you don't have the wear and tear. But we'll see what shakes out on who all wants to get involved in hosting the championship.
Well, here we go now. We've it was at the vet for years, and then so I understand the problems with the SEC schools, and the availability we have at USM. Are we considering non-college sites or what are our options? What other options do we have to host these playoffs?
I think they're looking at particular sites that would somewhere between 15 and 20,000. You may need that number of seats on a couple games. Right now, they're trying to keep it at the universities. The universities are interested in doing that. Last year, it was going to be back in Jackson. Jackson State hosted the SWAC championship game, so that's the reason it went to USM. Pretty quick. It's just there's a lot of ifs with the way the colleges are doing their schedules right now as far as making their facilities available. And when we were there at Mississippi State and Ole Miss and Southern Miss, don't get me wrong, everybody there were welcomed arms, and they've done a lot for all the kids and the coaches, from Mississippi. But I think you're going to continue to see a revolving, that it rotates to different venues.
Have you ever considered, and I say you, I'm talking about the executive committee, have you guys ever considered having, certain classifications at one location, certain classifications at another location? I mean, do y'all want to have all 7 games played on the same field?
Ideally, because of the number of manpower to pull off that state championship, because it's all volunteer that pulls them off. You really need them at one site. I know the softball goes, and they've been playing at Mississippi State and USM the last couple of years and rotating that around. But it works better because of the number of manpower that you need to pull that off. It needs to be at one site.
Okay. Another question I have, the 2-year deal. Y'all revisit this, you redistrict every 2 years, and that's based on head counts. Why 2 years?
That's been kicked around that we go to 4 years. A lot of the schools, and if you go up to DeSoto County over the last few years, it's the fastest growing district up there. And a lot of times, some of those numbers went from several hundred to over 1,000 in a 2-year period. All those numbers are collected from the Mississippi Department of Education, so no one really gets to fudge on their numbers. They ask us in September and October to submit numbers, and then they'll take our numbers from MDE, and then they'll place you according to that. Some of the parochial schools that do not answer to MDE, those schools got in-house visits from MHSA representatives, and they did their own head count, so they were placed in the proper classification.
You mentioned the parochial schools, and that's a big deal up and down the Mississippi River over there. And I mean, Natchez Cathedral, and there's some other ones over there, and St. Joe, I suppose. But now, a couple of years ago, there was some really there was interesting stuff going on about the fact that some of these parochial schools or private schools that are in the Mississippi High School Activities Association may not be subject to the same geography. Is that an issue with the did y'all get that worked out, or is that still a problem?
Okay, so what they have a 20-mile radius around their campus that they can draw students from to have immediate athletic eligibility. Now, if they come and sit out a year, that would satisfy that rule. But there is a 25 a 20-mile radius around their campus that they can draw kids from. And the other thing was, part of that happened with the parochial school several years ago. They had kids on their rosters that were from out of state, whether they be from Louisiana, whether they be Tennessee, wherever the line was. And the MHSA handbook does not allow for out-of-state kids to perform.
Well, see, that was a deal at Natchez over with Cathedral. So, but even though they were within the mileage, they were in a different state. How did they reconcile that? Did they just say, if you're not in the States, you can't come?
That is correct. And Cathedral pulled out and joined the other league, MAIS, and so that's what happened. There were several schools that did that because there was some on the Arkansas line up in the Delta, and I get it. That was whatever they felt like they needed to do because they had a good number of kids, and it is what it is with that. But that rule was even asked about being changed, and it was completely voted down about allowing out-of-state kids to play on normal rosters.
Okay. All righty, Coach. Anything else? I had you going there, and I couldn't help it. I started sticking my nose in there and interrupting your chain of thought. Anything else you want to tell us?
No, the biggest thing is that if anytime schools want the handbook to be changed, there is a process, and it's voted on twice, the first and second time. Most of the schools know that to get things on the agenda, how to do that. But it's a process, and I'll say this, the superintendents for the state of Mississippi, they have a big say in what goes on because obviously they run the school districts, and if they want something changed, the superintendents, they have a big voice in it also. But you know, you got MDE and you got the state legislature. They're wanting to do this, and then you're trying to keep everybody happy. But at the end of the day, we're responsible for 200 plus schools to make sure that basically everybody's playing by the same rules, and nobody's going to be given an advantage by circumventing some of the rules. But that's what we're there for.
Well, I want to tell you this, and I'm going to let you go. We're very fortunate, Coach Hathorn, to have you here. You come from an athletic background. You coached administration at the school level. Supervisor and principal of Wayne County High School. You're working up there with the Mississippi High School Activities Association on the executive committee, and you know what it's all about. And I think we're very fortunate to have you in this role. And I thank you for serving our community and our state and our kids as you do. You're doing a great job.
I appreciate it, Marshall. And like I said, if anybody ever has any questions, they can come stop by and see me, call or whatever. But there's a lot of good men and women up there that's working really, really hard every day.
Coach, we appreciate it. We're going to take a break to hear from our sponsor, and then we're going to come back with our final segment with old Dale McKee, my partner in crime on the Brouhaha, who couldn't be with us for the interview, but we're going to have him to close us out. So we'll see you after the break.
Phillips Building Supply in Laurel, your hometown building supply store since 1954. We are locally owned and pride ourselves on helping our customers find exactly what they need. From foundations to roofs to doors and windows, Phillips has it. For tools, hardware, lumber, and plywood, visit Phillips Building Supply.
Welcome back for our final segment. I tell you what, Dale, I know that you weren't necessarily privy to the interview. But you know what we talked about, and I tell you what, Bubba, man, he knows his stuff when it comes to this football and this high school activity stuff. He's been doing that a while.
Yeah, people don't understand. Of course, he's a principal right now, and he's been a supervising principal, which means you're the lead principal at that school for 7-8 years now, maybe 8 years, and so you have a lot on your plate, but I think, people may disagree with me, but I think principals that have been coaches have a little bit of advantage over principals that never have been.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but you have to, in this day and time, I don't care if you're a college president, you better understand sports as related to your college. Because it will get you fired just as soon as it will the athletic director or the head football coach. And I think just of his experience as an assistant coach, a pretty good high school football player, got to play in junior college, and then went on up to started coaching. And he worked his way up from assistants to coordinators to head coaches, and I think that just brings a lot to the table. And when he can interact with the Mississippi High School Executive Committee, which, has a lot of principals on it, most of them, I think, are administrators only, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And it does, you can understand things a lot better than someone that hasn't been, like, on the front lines, as they say.
Right. It just gets personal, up close and personal. But we're grateful for him, and I really enjoyed listening to what he had to say, and big changes in Mississippi high school football. So we'll see how that all works out. We were talking a little bit about LSU when we ended our first segment, Dale, and I want to come back. You're sitting at these guys. If they run the table, they'll be headed to Georgia to play for an SEC championship. And with this polling situation like it is, this could be the greatest CFP polling process ever, because LSU could go through and win the SEC and be a 2-loss SEC champion. And, would a 2-loss SEC champion get in with possibly a 1-loss Tennessee and a 1-loss possibly Ole Miss? I mean, how crazy could this thing get?
Well, I think that each week that kind of changes everything. It's who's hot at the right time.
Yeah.
And this is time to get hot. What if LSU lays a bomb this week? And what if Ole Miss would defeat Alabama?
Yeah.
Or what if Alabama climbed back into the picture somehow? I just this year with the big thing is you have 4 undefeated teams right now.
Yeah.
TCU is in there with the 2 Big Ten teams, Michigan and Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Georgia's still undefeated in the SEC. And I really don't think Georgia's going to lose a regular season game.
Yeah. I don't think they will either.
I think they're going to be in the SEC championship game. Now, if they lose, that's going to be the kinker. You've got your number 1 team all year, and they lose one game. Or are you going to punish them for losing that SEC championship?
And take possibly a 2-loss SEC champion and a 1-loss SEC runner-up. I mean, which one do you take?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they would have to take the champion, but the 1-loss team could get in.
What about Tennessee?
Just around. What's that?
Tennessee might finish up with just 1 loss.
Yes, that's true. That's true. So
you could have 4. You could have a 2-loss SEC champion, and you could have Ole Miss, Tennessee, and is there one more that could have 1 loss out of the SEC, and the whole playoffs could be SEC? How about that?
No, only got to happen all right there.
No, I agree with you, brother. I agree with you.
But I really think that I'll tell you, the conference surprised me the most this year is Big 12. I mean, Oklahoma State is falling back. Texas not as good as maybe. I know they're in the top 25, but they just don't seem like a powerhouse some weeks. Oklahoma's not having a good year, and I'm hearing teams like Iowa State and Kansas State winning, and now TCU, and it's just I think those guys have improved a lot, but honestly, I don't know. I guess TCU is the big team out there, but they got Texas this week, and if they lose that, they'll probably drop because people really haven't been impressed with their wins. I'm talking about TCU, and then you got out west. You got Oregon and USC.
Yeah.
And, that'll be decided in the Pac championship game. So it'll be one of those possibly, or UCLA might throw a kink into that too.
That's
so
true.
I think it's just gives sports writers a lot to write about. TV announcers a lot to talk about, and then it really helps the college game the way it's going. And I think Clemson probably hurt their chances a lot with their big time loss to Notre Dame.
Yeah, they're out
last week. So I'm not sure an ACC team will get in at all. But
I don't think. I think the only Big 12 team that has a chance of making it is TCU, and because Baylor's got
that whole conference.
Baylor's 6-3, Texas is 6-3, and Kansas State is 6-3. They not going even if they were to win the conference. I mean, TCU is the only prospect for Big 12 to have in there.
Yes, that's true. But my earlier statement, what I meant was that we're seeing these programs that always have been doormats coming to the top this year, like Kansas and Kansas State. And, Kansas, I remember they fired Les Miles a couple of years ago, and, they hadn't won over 2 games in 5 or 6 years, and now all of a sudden they've come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, those are good stories to me, the team that's had a loser for a while coming in. But I'm excited. I'm like everybody else. I'm waiting for the 4 polls to come up. But, Michigan, Ohio State's going to settle their score. And then what happens if the winner of that loses the Big Ten championship to ever who's in it, Wisconsin and Minnesota, everything for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, and they all got, a couple losses. I think Iowa's got more than that. But anyway, it's just going to be a fun year, and a lot of people, like I said, they're going to get eliminated this weekend. Yeah. And so we'll go from there,
Speaking of getting eliminated.
And the next weekend, and then you got the championship weekend, So it should be very, very interesting there.
Well, Dale, I believe we're out of time, my dear brother. I have enjoyed our time together, as I always do, here on the Brouhaha with you and our guest. And I want to remind everybody that you can follow us during the week on our Facebook page at the Brouhaha. We post a sideline view there and some other things. And you can also follow us on our YouTube channel, the Brouhaha, where we post and archive all of our shows, where you can go back and check those out. We want to thank you for joining us tonight. But like I usually have to say, it's time to say goodbye, Dale.
Goodbye, Dale.
And we'll see you next week for more of the Brouhaha. Get us out of here, Jamie.
You've been listening to the Brouhaha with Dale McKee and Marshall Wood. Heard Tuesday evening, 6 p.m. on WABO. For more of the Brouhaha, follow us during the week on Facebook and WABO.